Tampa Bay Buccaneers going through what y'all need to know to make some money on his team in 2021. So last year, 11-5, and more importantly, Super Bowl champions. One of the easier games you're ever going to see to bet on in the Super Bowl, given the status of the Chiefs' offensive line. But this team, obviously amazing, and frankly, could have been a lot better during the regular season. They went through some of the early growing pains, traditional of a new quarterback in a Bruce Arians offense. But overall, obviously, great year. And betting-wise, for me, 18-11, another team. Another bunch of money you make it if you're betting with me. 2019-1 as well. As far as changes, so we're going to kind of skip through this part pretty quick compared to most teams because there's basically nothing here. You lose from last year's roster, bad backup offensive lineman and a running back who can't play anymore, and Joe Hagan, LaShawn McCoy, and two like special team reserve safeties, Andrew Adams and Justin Evans. And you add Earl Watford, a veteran who's been around for a while, hasn't played in a year or so. We'll see. CJ Prosise, bad kind of running back. And then Gio Bernard, who actually we'll talk about later, but I do like him quite a bit. And then Antonio Hamilton, actually a decent player, but not somebody who's going to play a bunch of defensive snaps, very likely. This is the draft class for you. With rookies, once they get to the NFL, we'll talk about how good they are. Until then, I don't think there's much point in creating expectations for yourself, because if you're trying to bet objectively, that's one of the worst things you can do. But here is their draft class. So let's get into the 2021 roster position by position. So you see in the top right, that's the total number of players that have ranked at that position, so 73 quarterbacks. And the number to the right of the name is where that player ranks out of those. So Tom Brady, the fourth quarterback at a 73. And Tom Brady's still absolutely amazing. Tom Brady is going to, in effectively every scenario or every offense you put him in, you can call him game manager or system fan or whatever, you're wrong. But in whatever situation he's going to be in, he's going to lead your team into an exceedingly productive and useful offense. There are times where maybe numbers-wise, it's not going to reach the super, super high heights of somebody like Patrick Mahomes, but as far as somebody who's going to win you games because they're going to consistently move the ball, keep control of the ball, actually score points once they get to the red zone, and just do everything that you can really do to contribute to win, that's Tom Brady. He's a guy... he executes your offense very well. You saw towards the end of the year once he got more and more comfortable in the Arians offense and where he could or could not put the ball in play down the field. It's just, he's still extraordinarily good. As far as weaknesses go, there are a couple things I will say. Sometimes he does underestimate how good the most elite corners in the league are, which will lead to things like the 2 picks he threw against Jair Alexander when he played the Packers, things like that. Now, obviously, that doesn't come up all that much because there's not that many elite corners in the NFL, but that's one. And two, if he was theoretically behind a bad offensive line, you would absolutely be looking at a whole lot more issues. But given that he's not, obviously, don't have to worry about it too much. Backup-wise, Kyle Trask, rookie, we'll see, whatever. Blaine Gabbert, a guy, actually, as far as backups go, isn't like the worst thing in the world, but not somebody that you're excited about or particularly want starting games, although on this roster, probably be okay. So then we get to running backs, and I talk about there's only like 8 to 10 running backs in the NFL, who really matter, and this team definitely doesn't have one. But I will say Ronald Jones, I actually think is a bit underrated. He's very clearly the best running back on this team. He's a guy who actually reminds me sometimes of Chris Carson as far as being a pure runner who, once given space, is going to be able to take advantage of it because he's very athletic, very explosive, pretty strong, especially in his legs, and will actually be the cause of very long plays. Now, he doesn't always have the top end speed to turn them into touchdowns. He does struggle with truly making guys miss at times. He's not this ideal runner. He's definitely bad as a pass receiver and protector. So he does have all that working against him, I will say for sure. But as a pure runner of the ball, he's actually pretty damn good. Then, Leonard Fournette. So they won the Super Bowl with him. And if anything shows you that the running back position don't exactly matter, it's that. But yeah, he's a guy, any carry you give to Leonard Fournette, you're just actively hurting your offense's chance of that play going well. So while, yes, if he is blocked to get 5 yards or 10 yards or whatever, he'll probably get 5 or 10 yards. But he's going to go down on first contact the vast majority of the time. Granted, he will fall forward as opposed to getting, blasted back like some of the running backs. But that's like a yard, maybe 2 if you're very lucky, worth a difference. He's bad as a receiver. I understand he got a bunch of catches a couple of years ago in Jacksonville. Just look at why. He was pumped targets, and he didn't do very much with them. Overall, just a player who doesn't add value to your offense at all, despite, I will say, being, again, pretty fast if he gets to run 80 yards in a straight line, which, if that happens once a season, cool. But he's not exactly the only one with that skill, and just not a player who adds up value to your offense. Keyshawn Vaughn, horrible rookie season last year. Not somebody who I was impressed with at all in any facet of his running ability. And he uniquely had some of what I think were the worst ball skills in the NFL. And not just as a receiver, but just as a guy, whenever he was interacting with the ball, he looked nervous and scared, and his hands were not strong. He had bad fumbles. He had bad drops regularly. He just had a bunch of really issues you don't see at the NFL level very often. Maybe, was he nervous? What he's this or that? I have no idea. But he didn't show me anything that makes me think he should be on an NFL roster, to be honest with you. Then we do get Gio Bernard. Gio Bernard, I do think, could help this team quite a bit. He immediately steps in and becomes infinitely better than every other receiving back they have on the roster. He's still legitimately good at that. He can actually add value if you give him, 10 targets. He's not just going to get, the yards or whatever that those 10 targets would dictate. He's actually going to add some yardage to your offense and be a useful piece. He can do pass protection despite being a little undersized. Mentally, he's there. Overall, he's a good player. As a runner, I actually think he's more than capable too. And I can see the argument for him starting on this team, frankly. But either way, he's a useful player. Now, he is just a running back. He's very far from elite still, so I'm not going to freak out about it. But that is just something I will note. They do bring in CJ Prosise. He's kind of bad as the other side of the receiving back coin of just he's catching the ball because he's the one that they said was going to catch the ball. And then they also bring in Troy Pope, a guy who actually I think has performed pretty decently himself on the Chargers at times. And I would be, if he got 20 carries in this offense, I would think he'd be pretty productive. Then we get wide receivers. So from this point on with this roster, everything is basically going to reach the point of unfair to everyone else in the league in a lot of ways. They are extraordinarily good, again, at every position we talk about from here on out pretty much, and they're deep at a lot of them, and there's a reason this roster is so good and why this team is heavily favored as far as them versus the field goes to win the Super Bowl again next year, along with the Chiefs. But, yeah, they're so good. So wide receivers. At the top, you get Mike Evans and Chris Godwin. Now, I'm going to start with their positives for sure, and then I'm going to go over their negatives kind of together because I think they're pretty connected. But Mike Evans specifically. So he's a guy who is dominant as a downfield threat in the NFL. He actually uses his large body in ways that are productive as far as catching the ball down the field. There are a lot of big body guys in the NFL who are just kind of big for no reason. Mike Evans definitely not one of those. He's very strong. He knows how to play the ball in the air. He's really good at a lot of stuff. And he has the unique ability of when a press corner tries to press him, unless it's probably Jalen Ramsey, he will, or Stephon Gilmore, he will smack them. I mean, he will destroy them. He's so strong at the release of his routes and just in the first 5-10 yards that if any player, watch, a couple of years ago when he put up a monster historic stat line on the Seahawks, it was because they had these garbage press corners like Shaquille Griffin out there trying to keep up with them, and it's impossible. So Mike Evans, yeah, he's extraordinarily good at that. As an actual route runner, while he's not great, he's somebody who can do okay on intermediate stuff. Some things I will say with Mike Evans though, I said I'll say the negatives for after Chris Godwin, so I'll do that. But yeah, that's what Mike Evans is good at. Chris Godwin, he is, if not the best, for sure in the top 3, but I would say the best after the catch, ball in his hands receiver in the NFL. I think that scale, for some reason, I think he is, I don't know if he has that reputation completely, but it's very obvious when you watch him. He is so fast, and his legs are so strong that when combined with his balance and his ability to actually run to space downfield and not understand what he's doing, he's so dangerous. He's absolutely, like I said, I think the best after the catch wide receiver in the league because he's just super long and he has a chance to turn every time he touches the ball into a long touchdown, and it's not even that difficult for him. He also has legit receiver skills. He's not amazing at that stuff, but he can get open fine, especially, you see the production he had 2 years ago from the Bruce Arians slot position, which is a double-edged sword. I think that gets him, especially going into last year, kind of overrated. He's not the elite receiver that some other guys are, but whatever. That's not the point here. It's that he's super good at that one skill, and he's more than good enough at the other things as far as getting open or doing the things he's supposed to do as a receiver in offense that you're golden. And he's pretty strong and physical all throughout the catch as well. He still really, really good. Their negatives together, though, what I was going to mention is that they can struggle to win quickly at times and to create true separation. Which is why you saw at times they were the offense here was a little bit inconsistent, because when you're leaning on those top two guys who can get stuck in the mud at times against, now granted it takes good corners to do this, but against good corners it can lead to not ideal offensive circumstances. That's not a huge knock, but there is a difference between these guys and the Devontae Adams, Stephon Diggs guys at the actual top of the receiver position, which is important to know when you're trying to bet on this team as far as reasons that they're not going to blow everybody out. Opposite to those guys, though, is Antonio Brown. Antonio Brown still has it, still absolutely amazing, is going to be by far the guy who's the most open on this team. Still really, really good about understanding defenses. He will blow out bad corners regularly. The dude is still awesome. He, like almost no complaints. He doesn't quite bring the same other skills that he used to at this point that Mike Evans, Chris Godwin do as far as after the catch guy or a contested catch guy or even a super down the field threat. I don't think he's quite where he was 3-4 years ago, hence why he's ranked a little bit lower. But as far as usefulness goes, I think he might very well be the most useful receiver on this team, especially because of how good those other two receivers are, meaning that the attention Antonio Brown gets is never going to be that high. He's just going to beat players consistently and be so good for this offense. Everybody knows that. Everybody knows Antonio Brown. But yeah, he's still got it. Then depth-wise, we still rock it here. We got Scotty Miller, a player who's pretty good. He's definitely fast enough to be a threat whenever he's on the field. He has okay receiver skills while he's a little bit undersized. That doesn't actually show up that much compared to other undersized guys because he will fight through contact. He will be scrappy or whatever you want to call it. But not just as an underneath receiver, as a guy who's fighting for balls down the field and making plays. He's overall pretty good, definitely useful and worthy of being on the field. Then you have Tyler Johnson, a rookie last year, who flashed a bunch of really good stuff too. Now, granted, he was in a lot of easy positions because he would be the third, fourth, fifth option on any given play. But he was beating dudes in man coverage consistently. He was showing he can make plays, showing he had pretty damn good hands. He has one pretty extremely notable highlight catch from the playoffs last year. But yeah, Tyler Johnson's good himself, and was a player that if he was starting on this team, I'd be comfortable with the production he would give. And he's the fifth receiver. Then you also have Justin Watson. He's not amazing. He's a lot more those Madden receivers just because he's a big, fast outside guy, but he's still useful in his own right, and in a good offense is going to be just fine. You draft Jalen Darden, a guy I'm a huge fan of personally. Now he's a rookie, so I don't really want to, again, say he's going to be this or that in the NFL, but he has a chance to provide a skill set as far as a after-the-catch player that no one else on this team besides Chris Godwin does that could be really useful. And then even, Jaden Mickens has done okay things as receiver at times. He's more of a punt returner, but you're super good and you're super deep at this spot. Then at tight end, you got multiple starting level players there too. So Rob Gronkowski, I will say he definitely is not the same player he was 3 or 4 years ago, similar to Antonio Brown. Now he's still very useful. He's still very smart. He knows why he does things to beat defenses, and so he's able to do them consistently regardless of the looks that he's given. He is still very big and very strong in his hands. He is not horribly unathletic given his age or whatever. He still can run okay in a straight line. Good red zone target. Overall, very useful player. He's not nearly the blocker he used to be at this point for sure. Lost a lot of weight, that type of thing. And it's not like he's a guy who's actively beating man coverage at this point in his career. But overall, useful player for sure. And then you have Cam Brate, guy who I think, frankly, at this point is better. Not a knock on Gronk, just that Cam Brate is underrated and pretty damn good himself. He actually wins underneath in his routes, consistently. He's really good at it. He has crazy good hands, rivaling the best of the position with Kyle Rudolph and stuff like that at tight end. So strong, great in the red zone, and just blocker, I will say, but he's very valuable as receiving tight end as a guy who, frankly, I think should get a lot more reps on this team than he does, and I know Tom Brady likes him a lot, and it's for a reason. Past that, even, you have O.J. Howard. Now, let you on a secret, O.J. Howard's pretty bad. I understand he has the pedigree and he has the whole one of the best tight end prospects of all time as a first rounder and all that stuff. But if you look at the way and in theory, right, his skill set translates into being a great NFL tight end, but in practice, that just really doesn't happen. He doesn't separate very well. he has like horrible ball skills, as whether that's catching the ball or whether that's just running with the ball without fumbling. He's like really bad at it. And that those types of instances happen with so much frequency that's kind of hard to just put it down to bad luck. He's not a good blocker at all. He's maybe a little bit better than the other guys on this, maybe a little bit better than Braden Gronk, but like nothing special there. And while I will say his athleticism does show up if he's asked to run into a completely wide open space and do nothing but catch the ball and run forward. Unfortunately, that's not a particularly useful skill set or something that's particularly unique to him. So OJ Howard he just kind of hurts your offense most of the time he's out there. Then you have Tanner Hudson, a player who actually I'm going to talk about the reverse of. I like quite a bit. He's shown, granted a very small sample size, that he can actually do some things as the like downfield receiving threat that are okay. Now, again, very small sample size, and it's not like he's this world beater or anything like that. But I just want to point out that if he's forced onto the field, I think you could see like decent production out of him, especially given the status of the rest of this offense. Then offensive line wise, hey, look, we're great again. So Donovan Smith and Tristan Wirfs are your starting tackles. Donovan Smith is a player I think has gotten underrated I understand there was like a couple years at the beginning of his career wasn't all that great, but for a long time now, I think 3 or 4 years, he's been very, very good. He's a guy who rarely, if ever, gets beaten badly in pass protection. While he is not a great run blocker, he can do more than good enough, especially in this scheme where it's a lot of power running and doing double teams at the point of attack. He's capable of that, absolutely. And his only real weakness is against like really elite pass rushers, especially elite power rushers. Main example, look at the Bears game last year and Khalil Mack, but ain't exactly a lot of Khalil Macks running around in the NFL. And if it's not him, then Donovan Smith's going to handle pretty much every other level of pass rusher just fine. He's not elite. Again, he's not going to shut them down necessarily, but he's going to be more than good enough for your offense to be very good. Tristan Wirfs, one of the best rookie tackles in recent memory. Absolute monster. As a run blocker, he's a super athlete who does very, very well. With tackles, there are guys in the NFL. There are a lot of good athletes at the position in the NFL. But sometimes what you'll see is despite them theoretically being good at it, they'll just kind of run out into space and miss or run to the wrong places, take the wrong angles, just do things mentally that limit their ability to actually help in your run game. Tristan Wirfs suffers from none of that. He is very, very, very good at actually eliminating second-level defenders at the point of attack, at the line of scrimmage. He going to smack people as a pass protector, especially for a rookie. He was awesome from the very beginning of the year all the way through. Like borderline zero complaints. Could argue for him being ranked a lot higher. It is just kind of 1 year sample size. Is basically the only reason. But Tristan Wirfs is awesome. Depth wise, you do struggle a bit there. Josh Wells has played snaps in the NFL and not been particularly good before. Ron Hainsey, a 3rd round rookie. At guard, so Ali Marpet, super elite player. He effectively zero complaints. He is an absolute animal at the line of scrimmage. He destroys people all the time. Super good in pass protection. Rarely, if ever, loses. I think he is as close to a carbon copy of Quentin Nelson, who's the guy I have right ahead of him, as you're going to get. He doesn't get nearly the name recognition, but as far as production-wise, what he actually brings to the field, dude is an absolute animal. Very, 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 very good. There are other guard spots. So this is the only other place where I'm going to be a little bit negative for a long time here. And that's this other guard spot. So Alex Kappa, I don't think is particularly good. I know some Bucs fans kind of like him. But I think he's been unfairly passed over as basically the only thing that's been wrong with his offensive line for a couple of years. Too much blame has gotten put onto like Donovan Smith for kind of no reason. Because when you look at what's actually happening, a lot of times the problems boil down to Alex Kappa. Now that sounds way harsher than I'm really trying to be because he's still fine. He's still a guy who I'm comfortable with starting in my offensive line. Granted, it's on the lower end, but yeah, he does decent things as an athlete in space. He will move to the second level. Okay. But as a pass blocker, he just loses way too frequently for my taste. He is the only guy in this offensive line who I think is even capable of like falling flat on his face in the line of scrimmage because he guessed wrong or lunged wrong on the way a defensive lineman moved, which is an infrequent thing. He's not awful out here, but that is the one thing I'll say. And frankly, actually, I think we saw pretty clear proof of this throughout the playoffs last year. They have a better player at that position than Aaron Stinney. Aaron Stinney is a lot more steady. He doesn't have the high-end play that Alex Kappa does. I will definitely say that, especially as a run blocker. He's not going to make the same impact up and down the field. But it's not like he's bad at it, and he's more than comfortable like just doing his job and not losing very consistently. Now, I understand it was only like 3 games, but 3 games isn't exactly nothing. Like, that's enough for me to be comfortable saying that I like him-ish as a starter, and I would prefer him to start over Alex Kappa. But either way, it's another spot where you have multiple starter like worthy players. So whoever ends up starting, like, you're going to be okay. And then at center, another another elite position. Ryan Jensen's awesome. Borderline no complaints. I don't think he's an athlete. He's definitely not at like the top level of centers, and he's not like quite the perfect pass protector that like a Frank Ragnow or Jason Kelsey is or whatever. But whatever. He's so far past the point of good enough to be like an elite center that it's fine. He's very, very, very good. Very good in the run game too. Fits the scheme very well. So when you look at his offense as a whole, they're going to be super productive and really, really good again. You have Tom Brady behind a really good offensive line, throwing to a super deep, super good receivers. Everybody knows it. It's very obvious. There's a reason this, again, I mentioned before, there's a reason this team is so heavily favored in the NFC. And it's because they're not just very good, but they have so many ways to win on any given game that it's hard to really find faults. The only one is, like I said, if you do come across a team that has good enough corners to play Mike Evans and Chris Godwin man's coverage, which does exist, then you can start to run into issues. But again, with how good Brady is, with how good their run game is, and with how good their other receivers are, it's just like, it gets tough, man. It gets really tough when you talk about how you can stop this offense in any level of consistency. Basically, it takes whoever the best given defense is in the NFL next year. So speaking of that, actually, we might be talking about the best defense already on this team. So position by position, what we got here. Front 3, they go crazy. William Golston, I think, as a player, is very underrated. He's legitimately super good. Should be starting on every team. Would be starting on every team in the NFL, I would assume. He penetrates very well. He's a very good run defender. Like, almost no complaints with him. He's not super elite at the stuff. He's not going to be a guy who like has this gigantic pressure rate. That's what keeps him out of the top, whatever, like 10, 15. But okay, he's still awesome. Really, really good player. Dominican Sue. Dominant run defender. As a pass protector, he can as a pass rusher, he can push the pocket some. He has good enough hands to win at times. Not a super quick winner, not the pass rusher he was like in his first few years in the NFL, but whatever. Still really, really good. And again, pretty much dominant as a run defender and as a guy who can make plays in the backfield behind the line of scrimmage in that phase of the game. Then you have some, Patrick O'Connor has shown he can be sometimes as a backup. Khalil Davis, that ranking might be a little harsh. Very small sample size. He did do some okay things. But who knows if any of those defensive tackle backups are going to play, because at nose tackle, you have like the best nose tackle position in football very comfortably. So Vita Vea, I have him second behind Brandon Williams, but he might as well be first. It's the same thing. I think they're pretty much tied, if not Vita Vea being better. I could easily argue that. Vita Vea is amazing. He's a super impactful pass rusher for his position, because not only does he just smack centers back into the quarterback's lap, but he will actually move off of them and create free lanes for himself and be able to like be the one who finishes a sack, which from the nose tackle position is wildly unique and super valuable. As a run defender, he's crazy strong, maybe the best in that. Now, Brandon Williams is like an all-timer as a run defender, but like Vita Vea is right up there. He's so good about not just keeping his lanes and keeping his gaps, but controlling offensive line and not letting himself be taken out of plays and constantly doing things that are affecting the way the offense tries to play. Vita Vea is amazing. Backup-wise, you have really good players too. Raheem Nunez-Roches played a whole lot last year, showed that he's a very good run defender for sure. As a pass rusher, not a big fan of him, but not every player can be the freak Vita Vea is. So he's super useful. And Steve McClendon, guy traded from the Jets, who's pretty damn good himself too, especially as a run defender. He's another one of these kind of, that phase of the game, not so much of a pass rusher, but again, okay. He's really another really, really good player. Then on the edge, you have Shaquille Barrett, one of the best pure speed rushers in the NFL, a legitimately impactful rusher, like a guy who actually gets to the quarterback, who bends the edge very well, and fits on this team perfectly because of the way he combines with such a dominant pocket-pushing defensive front. It makes everything go back further, which is right where you get into Shaquille Barrett's danger zone or whatever you want to call it. So really, really good. Not amazing as a run defender. that's maybe a weakness on this defense is that, but it's not like he's bad. He's not even close to bad at it. He's just like not elite at that spot. Jason Pierre-Paul on the other end is a very, very good run defender. As a pass rusher, he's definitely capable. Not somebody you maybe want to lean on as like a number one or as like a guy who's going to rush the passer every third down for you, but they don't need to lean on that. And it's not like he's bad at it. Again, he's like all around a really good player, super smart, really good. And frankly, helps limit a lot of these modern NFL offenses because he can keep up on the edge with teams like the 49ers, the Rams, the Packers, stuff like that, because he is still athletic. Then you got some depth here too. Anthony Nelson's a player I like a whole lot. I think he's shown that he can actually rush the passer at like a meaningful level. And he's just a random rotational guy. I mean, he's better than that, but not a big name on this team, but he's a really good player himself. And then they get a first-round rookie as an edge defender who you never know with rookies, but goddamn. Then we talk about off-ball linebacker, and it gets literally even better. Devin White and Lavonte David are both amazing in their own ways. Devin White is a menace all across the field. Everybody, he's famous for how fast he is, and it shows up when he plays very clearly. The dude can make plays literally at every level of the field as a pass defender. While mentally he can get a little goofy sometimes, most of the time he's still really good, has actual zone instincts, can like cover guys instead of just standing back in his zone. Super, super valuable player. And then Lavonte David is like the perfect signal calling veteran linebacker you could ask for pretty much outside of Bobby Wagner. Like he does not make mistakes. He's actually good in pass coverage, even in man coverage against like legitimately good tight ends or running backs. He is still, despite his age, a pretty good athlete. He can make plays sideline to sideline and up and down the field. He makes run fits outstandingly well. He can take on blockers. Like every positive you say about a linebacker basically is Lavonte David, except for he's not a super, super athlete anymore. Not that he ever really was, but whatever. Like it's another amazing position. Depth wise here, they do hurt a little bit. Kevin Minter, not nearly the player the guys ahead of him is. Now he's been in the NFL for a while. Would he be a disaster if he had to play? No, but that's, I guess, a little thing. So then we talk about corners, and shocker, they're really good again. So Carlton Davis, Jamel Dean, two awesome outside corners. I will say here that I actually have vaguely similar criticisms of them as I do of the top two receivers on the other side of the ball, in that while they are super good at a lot of things, they are both a little bit into that like bigger, slower prototype where the actual like good modern NFL receivers, be that Devontae Adams or Stephon Diggs or guys like that, can take advantage of them for sure. But they're good enough at everything that it takes a receiver of that caliber. Tyreek Hill is another clear example of that. Hence the Chiefs-Bucks game last year. But not the Super Bowl, the earlier regular season game. But yeah, those guys, whatever. That's the type of receiver it takes to show up any weaknesses in them. Otherwise, they're going to be really good. They're going to press some receivers just out of the game sometimes. Like they're awesome. And even Ross Cockrell as their third guy on the outside is pretty damn like competent himself. He has been for a very long time in the NFL. At slot, Sean Murphy-Bunting is awesome himself. He's a really good player. He is a lot more into that modern prototype where he can actually kind of cover quicker guys better. Decent run defender too, like almost no complaints with him. And then they bring in Antonio Hamilton, who hasn't played in a couple of years, really, like serious snaps. But I thought a couple of years ago in the Chiefs flashed at least a little bit of some ability. But yeah, another place where you're really, really good at the top. And then safety here. Okay, so here I will pump the brakes a little bit. Again, this is the last time that I'll be a little bit negative about them. Obviously, it's also the last position. But here they're not ideal. They're just pretty good. Antoine Winfield I'll start with. Antoine Winfield is a nice safety. I think he got exceedingly overrated because of a couple of factors last year. One being he made the famous play in the Super Bowl where he gave the peace sign to Tyreek Hill. The other being, as a rookie in his first few games, he got a reputation of being very good immediately. But if you look at who the Bucs were playing, their first games, they were playing teams who did not throw the ball past like 5 yards down the field. And it was like the Saints and like Panthers and stuff like that. And the first time they played a team who did, being the Chargers and Justin Herbert, they got 30 hung on him. He was kind of responsible for that. I'm not trying to shine Antoine Winfield. He's still good. He makes a lot of plays. I think he's going to get very much better after his rookie year as we go forward. But as of now, especially as like a deep safety, he's actually more just like okay and decent as opposed to like very good. So I just want to mention that. The other safety spot, Jordan Whitehead and Mike Edwards are actually like almost the same player. Jordan Whitehead is actually an extraordinarily good, that's too strong, a very good run defender. He can like come up and really make plays behind the line of scrimmage. He's super hard hitting. I like a lot of things about him in that aspect of the game. As a coverage player, not so excited. He's not somebody I want covering actual good players. And again, he worries me as a guy who's going to play like deep zones or anything like that. But it's not like he's a disaster. I think he's starter level, sure. And then they have, again, Mike Edwards, who's basically the same player as a backup, just a little bit worse because he's not as good of a run defender, but like, and maybe he's a little bit better as a pass coverage guy, a little bit. But that's another spot where you have two like starting worthy level players again. So you're gonna be okay there. So when you talk about the defense as a whole, it's like, what the hell, man? All their success last year is pretty goddamn repeatable. The only types of, like, we'll talk about this with the whole schedule preview, but the only types of things that worry me are if a team has a good enough receiver or multiple good enough receivers to actually beat their corners consistently. Because I will say, while their pass rush is very good and very deep, it isn't quite at the like high end because they don't have like a one individual who will like they don't have Myles Garrett, they don't have Daniel Hunter, that type of thing where they don't have somebody who's going to win like quickly, constantly. Now with Vita Vea fully healthy, actually they might, but it's a little different coming from an interior rusher as opposed to edge guy. Either way, though, that's such like a unbelievably high standard for an offense for me to even be like worried about this team producing that. You're fine. Also, again, their deep safety play worries me a little bit, but I suspect Antoine Winfield is going to get better about that in the second year. So, looking ahead at their schedule, really the only things that we're worried about, if we come across a team that can cover Mike Evans and Chris Godwin and make them be a little bit different in the way they try to play that, because with Bruce Arians, obviously they're trying to put the ball down the field in the air all the time. If they come across a team they can't quite do that against, and they can't just turn around and like punish on the ground because they're good offensive line, then maybe we're worried about it. And then defensively, again, we're looking at a team with like elite receivers who are going to be able to beat them. Does that exist on their schedule? Well, the Rams do have Jalen Ramsey and Darius Williams, but they lose some of their secondary talent. So they're not quite the same now. The Dolphins, they have the corners for it, for sure. Maybe, depending on how well whoever plays the other outside corner spot in Washington does, if that's Kendall Fuller or somebody at Darryl Roberts, maybe. God, no. Like, it's really tough to see a team being able to just legitimately slow down this offense. And then defensively, they do play the Rams with Robert Woods, I suppose, and Matthew Stafford could give them trouble deep. But is that something I'm worried about over the course of a full game? I'm not quite sure about that so far. And then you do play the Bills in Week 14, who definitely have the receivers to do what I talked about. But their defense is really vulnerable to the Buccaneers specifically that, I'm not all that worried. So, yeah, this team is going to be just wildly good. You saw how they were the second half of the regular season, obviously the playoffs, and a lot of that is very repeatable and sustainable and happened for very clear reasons. So Buccaneers, you didn't need to know this going into the year, going into this video, but they're going to be amazing once again.